This last Wednesday, OWI finally released version 9 of Squad. It has been over 9 months since the last major update to Squad, and it is a huge accomplishment for OWI to finally get over releasing this Unreal Engine 5 hurdle that has been bottlenecking Squad for the last 9 months. However, there are many arguments to be made that this update is not ready for full release, and I will get more into that in the video. The main goal of this video is to show the differences between the version 9 release versus the last version of the playtest, as well as show how the changes that OWI made in this update will affect Squad's gameplay versus the previous version in Squad. If you're looking for an in-depth analysis on all the things new in the new update, then this probably isn't the video for you. There are plenty of other Squad YouTubers who do a much better job at that than myself. But this video is going to be breaking down a lot of the changes and how they'll affect the gameplay, how several things still need to be fixed, but also highlighting some of the good things that were implemented in this update. To start off with the gunplay, once again, they have reduced the ICO sway and some of the recoil with a lot of the guns to make them feel better, and they do feel substantially better overall. That was one of the best things that I took away from the most recent playtest was the gunplay. Gunfights felt like they weren't as frustrating for me from what I've played so far of the new update. The thing that annoys me most in the gunplay now isn't necessarily the recoil, but the suppression that results from gunfights. It still is insanely inconsistent. Anyone who has played Squad post ICO can tell you that the way that they've implemented their suppression does not feel consistent in the slightest. And there are a lot of factors that go into this, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the new update, the suppression feels like it was toned up a bunch. And I've went back through the playtest footage and tried to compare it to pre-playtest Squad just to see the comparison with suppression. And while there isn't a drastic difference, it definitely seems like something to do with the lighting or something they've changed with the engine does make suppression feel more intense, or at least appear more intense than it was in previous Squad. And I noticed that a lot more when playing just this weekend about how my gunfights, I felt like I was suppressed for much longer periods of time or couldn't see out of the suppression more than I used to be able to. I hope this is something that OWI continues to adjust along with the ICO, because the gunplay system for the game currently is just not what it should be. And I think messing a little bit with the suppression, messing a little bit with the sway to try and get a more consistent and better feel will go a long way for Squad's future. Now, a change a lot of people I feel like aren't talking about as much just because it doesn't affect the game in as drastic as a way as a lot of others is the changes to IMF, to Militia. Before the update, Militia was a mix between Western and Soviet era weapons, mainly featuring Soviet era stuff, but just a few Western weapons mixed in. Additionally, it was just slated as an Eastern European militia force without a super specific alliance form. They kind of generalized this random Eastern European vibe by having all the voice lines for the faction in Serbian and not having them have all specifically Soviet era stuff. Now the faction only features Soviet era weaponry, and the voice lines have been changed from Serbian to Russian. Now overall, I don't hate this change. It's supposed to kind of be a Russian-backed separatist movement now faction in the area, which I think is a interesting and more realistic feel to the faction. But at the same time, it does, I feel like, take a little bit of character out of this faction. And I really hope that in replace for making Militia a now Russian separatist-backed faction, that they add a new Eastern European, either militia or slightly more unconventional faction back to the game to get those voice lines back, to get some of those cool weapon platforms that have now been swapped out for strictly AKs and all of the AK-esque platforms that Soviet era forces would use. It's sad to see some of the uniqueness of this faction go. I hope that at least they're able to reuse these assets in a useful way and for them to not have just gone to waste. Another thing I wasn't too happy about at first, but then made sense for me later, was the removal of Balea. Balea has been completely removed for the map pool for the time being. I originally thought this was a really dumb decision because Squad needs variety map pool right now, and we haven't had a new map in absolutely forever, and removing one that was decently solid seemed very foolish to me. But if you remember from all of the playtests, all of the snow textures and different emplacement textures were very, very buggy on this map, and so it it seems like they weren't able to figure that out by the time of release, so they've decided to just temporarily remove the map until they can iron out those bugs, which I guess is understandable. It's kind of another sign this update was very much rushed, that they couldn't get the snow on this map to not glow these weird colors in time for the release. But regardless, I am happy that it seems that it is coming back, because although it wasn't, I don't think, most people's favorite map, it was a very good map for some cool infantry gunfights every once in a while, in addition to decent armor gunfights. As we already knew with the playtest as well, MEA has officially been changed to Iran, and with that, a lot of the G3s with the kits have been swapped out for AKs, or the Iranian version of an AK. Personally, I'm a little sick of AKs in the game, so I would have preferred more G3s to AKs, but I understand from an actual realistic perspective why they decided to go down that route. Overall, I think this is a cool change, just so that the atmosphere of Squad can remain more realistic and they don't have to use these substitute names for real world actors. In addition to the G3 being removed from a lot of the Iran kits, they have now added the option of G3s to the Rifleman and SL for Turks, which I don't really have a massive opinion of. I think it's a good change just for weapon variety for Turks, and I would probably rather use the G3 than the Turkish weapon in most cases, but both are kind of equally have that high damage, high recoil type aspect to them, so I think I prefer the G3 to that, but overall doesn't really massively affect gameplay. The new commendation system is now in full effect in the main game, and I absolutely love it. It actually gives people a reason to work as a team, to do teamwork actions. It actually gives people in my squad an incentive to do things for teamwork. If I need a Logi run, I'll say, I can give you a accommodation at the end of the game, and people actually kind of might do it for something. It's really not much, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean much, but it's a nice little thing for players to be able to get for actually playing and working together, and will display on screen players that have more experience than other players, which from a teaching perspective, I think that's a really good thing, so that people can actually see who the experienced players are and are more likely maybe to listen to that player's advice. The new skirmish game mode, which I touched on my last UE5 video, is also in the main game now, and I really enjoy this change. Old skirmish was just a smaller RAS that just nobody played, because there was no point to on a 100 versus 100 player server. So actually mixing up the game mode and giving it its own unique gameplay and feel is really welcome change. And it's definitely a more casual game mode when you compare it to normal squad. It's just straight up infantry chaos, but I think that can lead to some really great moments, and it's a fun change of pace from just the normal RAS and invasion that you play constantly when you play squad. You don't have to focus on so many other things. You can just focus on your small unit tactics, or just controlling a small group of guys in your squad in a small area, rather than the large scale coordination that requires on a normal squad, which is a really nice change of pace. The Canadians and the Americans both gained a Pathfinder kit. This kit is basically the Blue 4 equivalent of a Raider kit, which I have mixed feelings about. I mean, cool, it's like new content, and it gives people a specialization that they can, if they want to have close quarters gunfights, or they're in a close quarters map, they can get an edge possibly. But at the same time, I don't understand why OWI is adding so many new kits to existing factions. While it's beneficial for a gameplay perspective and new content perspective, from a teamwork perspective, that's now a slot that I could have had for a rifleman resupplying a lat. That's a slot that I could have had another medic. Instead, it's another guy that really doesn't have a role other than go get in gunfights and not necessarily play with the team. I'm just concerned that with all of the new variants and different kits that are being added in every single update to squad, that there's going to be so many to the point that that's much harder to get a cohesive squad composition like you used to be able to get, just because there's so many different options that everyone wants to play these random kits. But overall, the kit itself, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's very beneficial if you have close range gunfights on a closer range map. It just seemed a bit pointless to me. In addition to new kits, you have the VSS and ASVAL marksmen on now both militia and Russian factions, which once again, I don't understand necessarily why they added this. It's just a more rattier marksman. You're giving a marksman a suppressor, a kit that is already notorious for having players that are going to go off in the middle of nowhere and be useless. You're giving a suppressor so they can sit in bushes, not play with the squad, even more than they already do. The gun itself is very cool and is fun to use, but just from a outside looking in perspective, I don't understand the reason for this change. It seems like they also did not change any of the driving physics from the last build, which I'm quite disappointed in. Squad's driving was nothing to write home about already. To be completely honest, Squad's driving was bad as it was, and when I heard that the new playtest was going to be updating the driving, I was very excited. But this version of the driving is just a different type of bad. Vehicles have so much more weight to them, which is cool from a feeling perspective, from like a immersive perspective, but not for a driving perspective. You have to brake so far before you turn now, and the e-brake does not feel like it works at all like it used to. In an update where they were supposed to make tracks better, they don't necessarily feel all that much better. I mean, you can get over some terrain easier now, but they feel a lot more slow and sluggish than they already are on a lot of occasions. Only very specific tracked vehicles, in my opinion, felt better after this update. And as for wheeled vehicles, they feel a lot easier to flip, which I thought was impossible to do. It's almost as if making the vehicles feel heavier means that if you take a turn just slightly too fast or hit a bump at the slightly wrong angle, it's now going to flip even easier than it already used to. In my opinion, this is just kind of a net zero change. The driving in Squad was already bad, and they replaced it with the new system, which seems to be kind of equally as bad. Maybe I'm overreacting to how bad it is just because I'm not used to it and I'm so used to the old system. We'll see with time, but at the end of the day, I don't really understand what they were going for here. I just want them to make driving not frustrating in Squad, which I feel like isn't that crazy of a ask. The brightness with UE5 was also not adjusted from the playtest, which I'm a little disappointed in. I was hoping that they would be able to see in the playtest how dark some rooms are and fix this. I'm not opposed to some rooms being dark on maps so that the muzzle flash can be showed off and that you can play around with it, but some rooms were insanely dark. I mean, you cannot see anything in some of these rooms unless you are firing your gun. I feel like this increases people not willing to push and will camp in dark rooms just to be able to get an edge on people, and I don't think it's good for gameplay. I'd rather see gameplay encourage players to make maneuvers, to make flanks, to make plays, rather than sit and not move and not play with the squad and not go on to objectives more than they already do. The audio was definitely better than it was in the playtest. During the playtest, the audio was all sorts of messed up. The footsteps were messed up. The gun sounds were messed up. The vehicle audio was all over the place. When you're running, it felt like there was a person running right behind you, and it definitely is improved, but there are still some bugs. In the playtest, it was really bad that whenever somebody started talking, they would only come in on one ear, one radio message, and then the next one they'd come in at the other ear, and then the next one they'd come in at both ears. Now that it's live, they seem to have fixed it slightly, but sometimes when the person talks for the first time, I still hear them in only one ear. Additionally, some kits more than others seem to have that sound where it sounds like somebody is running behind you when you are running. So they've seemingly fixed it for some kits or made it less audible for most kits, but I can still hear another person running behind me sometimes, and it's very annoying. This is a legacy bug that was removed a long time ago that they have now reintroduced to the game and have put back into the game with this update. Vehicle audio sounds a lot better at being able to tell the direction at where the audio is coming from than it was in the playtest, but once again, I still had some issues, and the people I was playing with still had some issues identifying the direction far out where the vehicle was coming from, which really wasn't as big of a problem in UE4 Squad. Server lag is also miserable right now, and this is the biggest point when it comes to why this update was not ready. It doesn't matter how good of hardware server owners have, 100-player servers are insanely laggy, especially on larger maps. I didn't notice this problem on medium to small maps nearly as bad, but every time we went on a Lashkar, went on a Yeeho, the voice audio was so bad. Everybody was very laggy, and you could tell there was just certain things about the server that were not functioning properly. And from all the news that OWI has put out recently, as well as server operators, this is just a compatibility with UE5 thing that has not been fixed, despite it being a known issue before the playtest was released. And this really makes you wonder why OWI still went through with releasing it. I was a massive proponent of just getting this update out here because the game desperately needed content. There was no content for 9 months. But if your server operators, the lifeblood of Squad, can't run the game on bigger maps properly, what are we doing here? OWI already had a disgruntled server owner hack the server browser as a result of some of their strange policies for how they are now accepting servers, and now they're still having server issues regardless of all those stringent policies. It seems like to me that they're trying to get all of their server operators to upgrade, and despite a lot of them upgrading as a result, it's still an OWI and a Unreal 5 engine problem, not a server operator problem. This just seemed like a massive oversight to me and was not a good decision to release the update while the servers couldn't run the game properly on 100-player servers. Additionally, something that I noticed that I know a lot of other players aren't going to have a problem with at all is that the commander assets are very buggy right now. Every time there's been an issue in the past with commander assets, I feel like they have taken forever for OWI to fix them just because a very small percentage of the player base interacts with them every game. But I played commander multiple times this weekend, and every time I tried to call in an airstrike, the icon bugged out and I couldn't put the airstrike exactly where I wanted to. I had to kind of take my mouse out of the radius and put it back in to try and get the airstrike to point the direction I wanted it to. It was very finicky, and while I was able to get the airstrike to work, most of the time it wouldn't kill the desired target because I had to stretch it extra long for the icon to be able to place. Stuff like this just really makes me upset as somebody who plays commander often. The commander has needed some adjustments and some changes from OWI for a long time now, and it has been pushed under so many other things because such a low number of players play commander regularly. The menu is super buggy. There's all these problems with the icons, and it has needed an overhaul for a long time, and I really hope that OWI fixes the problems with this and doesn't let it sit for a long time like other bugs with the commander assets have in the past. On another note, a really positive change that they did add with this update was something that I talked quite a bit about in my Why the Squad player base keeps getting worse follow-up responding to comments video, was about squid bots or squad bots, the mod that was purchased by OWI and added bots into Squad. There is a whole laundry list of improvements, different changes to the bots, potential for PvE game modes in the future, and a whole load of other things like bots being able to drive vehicles better than they currently were, bots finally not being able to see through smokes, and a bunch of other quality of life little changes. I think this bot mod that was now official part of the game, I'm really happy for the potential of the bots to not be used just for seeding layers anymore, but for other aspects of the game, that you can integrate them into different game modes, integrate them into different scenarios that you can use just to give players that option. I think there's a lot here for this feature. I hope they continue to update the bots and make them even more functional than they are, and that was a major point for me in that video, so I'm very happy that they actually followed through. I personally haven't gotten a chance to play with the new bots, but from all I've seen, it looks like they're a lot better than they previously were. Now, there's a lot of other things I haven't mentioned in this video. There's so much about this update that I wasn't able to get everything in here that I wanted to, but overall, this update was a long time coming and desperately needed to come out. I, like most of the community, am very disappointed at the quality that it came out at. We were really hoping with the extra time that we gave OWI to cook that they would be able to fix a lot of these issues before they released it, and they seemingly didn't fix a large percentage of them. There's a lot of questionable changes in this update, and while a lot of them are for the better, a lot of them I'm just left scratching my head, why would that be a necessary change? Something else I didn't mention was that they took tanks out of the logistics units. So that means that the units that were able to previously put multiple tows per fob, put multiple habs, but also had zero armor other than light vehicles and a tank, now have purely light vehicles, which, while that unit type is really good for specific scenarios with the two habs, they were already barely picked even by teams who didn't have anyone who actually wanted to even man the armor, just because denying yourself the ability to have armor is rarely worth having the extra spawns, especially in a pub match. So by removing the tank, you are now making this already infrequently played unit type more undesirable. I don't understand that at all, and from a gameplay perspective, not having an MBT is a huge detriment to a team. If you don't have an MBT and the enemies do, and they are utilizing it to the full effect, you are screwed. And while, yes, you can say that you can counter it with multiple toes per hab like there is for that unit type, you need a lot more teamwork to get a resupplied toe fob up and running in the right location than you do to get 3 guys in MBT that are decent, that are just able to steamroll the team the rest of the game. This is also an issue with the Canadian Resistance Forces that they just added as a little sub-faction into the game, or I guess they're their own faction, but they're mainly reused assets, so they're basically just kind of a combination of the Canadian faction and the PMCs. But regardless, they're new. They also don't have a tank, which I didn't think was a huge deal. I mean, it made sense as a militia kind of irregular force, but after playing multiple rounds with them, they seem severely underpowered. They have no helicopters, the best armor they have is a Coyote, and they don't have any additional AT, it felt like, than a normal Blue 4 or Red 4 faction. The best thing they have is the Tannerite backpack. Anyway, I could continue to go on and on about these changes and how I think they would affect it, but I think I've gotten my point across. While OWI desperately need to get this update out, and I'm glad that they finally decided that they needed it out for content's sake, the state of the game right now is unacceptable. And by the end of the year, there are so many other games like Battlefield 6 and several other alternatives to Squad that Squad's player base could go and play, that there needs to be a reason to come back and play Squad over those games. And right now, I don't see a major reason for that. I sincerely hope that they can get their act together by the end of the year and we can just see a functional game that makes you want to continue to come back and play it time after time. Anyway, if you stayed this long into the video, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, trying to get to 500 subs by the end of the year. I think that's a doable goal, but I appreciate all your support, all you guys who are new here, and I'll see you in the next one.